Wait, before you scroll past, I need you to see something first. What you are looking at right now is not meat. It is not chicken, it is not pork, it is not some expensive cut of beef that took 2 hours in the oven. What you are looking at is cabbage. Ordinary, humble, dirt-cheap cabbage, turned into something so golden and crispy and deeply satisfying that I genuinely struggled to believe what I was tasting the first time I made it. And I say that as someone who has cooked everything from slow-braised short ribs to pan-seared duck breast. This cabbage fritter stopped me cold. It stopped me mid-bite, fork in the air, with a look on my face that I imagine was somewhere between confusion and embarrassment, because I have spent years telling people that vegetables need a lot of support to compete with meat, and this thing sat in front of me and made me a liar in a single mouthful. If you are the kind of person who's cabbage at the grocery store because you think it is boring, I completely understand you. I was exactly that person 2 years ago. And that is exactly why I'm asking you to stay until the very end of this video, because by the time you see this finished on a plate, I promise you will have already pulled out your phone to add cabbage to your shopping list. Over 5 million people have already had this exact moment of disbelief when they first encountered this recipe. Today it is your turn. Let me tell you something about cabbage that most people do not know, and that I think is genuinely worth understanding before we cook anything at all. Cabbage has been feeding entire civilizations for thousands of years. Not as a side dish, not as a garnish, not as the thing you push to the edge of your plate. As the main event, the center of the meal, the thing that kept families alive and fed and, remarkably, happy. Ancient Rome considered it a cure for nearly every illness and ate it in enormous quantities before drinking sessions because they believed it protected the liver. During the Great Depression in the United States, families fed themselves through the hardest winters on little more than cabbage and creativity, a refusal to believe that cheap food had to be bad food. German and Polish farm communities in the 19th century developed ways to transform this vegetable into dishes so satisfying, so layered with texture and flavor, that the recipes were written in handwritten books, passed mother to daughter, grandmother to grandchild, for generations. And somehow, somewhere along the way, we forgot all of that. We started expensive protein, spending $20 or $30 or sometimes $50 on cuts of meat for a single dinner, and cabbage got quietly relegated to the back of the refrigerator drawer where it slowly yellowed into irrelevance. I want to ask you something right now, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments below. When was the last time cabbage was the star of your dinner table? Not as a coleslaw, not as sauerkraut on the side of a hot dog, not hidden inside a soup where you hardly noticed it. The actual undisputed star of the meal. Because what I am about to show you is going to change that answer, and I think it is going to do it in a way that surprises you. The recipe you are about to see is built on two of the most ancient, most dependable, most honest ingredients in cooking: cabbage and eggs. Now, before you click away thinking you already know where this is going, let me be very precise about what makes this version different from anything you have probably tried before. Most cooks who attempt something with cabbage treat it as an ingredient that needs to be managed, hidden inside something more compelling. They boil it into softness until it surrenders. They smother it in cream or butter or cheese to make it palatable. They fold it inside other things where it plays a supporting role. What this recipe does is the exact opposite. It takes the natural structural qualities of cabbage, its layered fibers, its faint sweetness, its ability to hold heat and resist moisture and maintain texture under extremely high temperatures, and it uses all of those qualities deliberately to build something that eats more like a golden, crispy, savory pancake than anything you would expect from a leafy veg. The eggs are not there to make it light and fluffy. They are there as a binding structure, the architectural element that holds this entire thing together under the heat of the pan so that you press it down and wait. When you resist every impulse to move it or poke it or check on it every 30 seconds, what you get on the other side is a caramel, almost lacquered crust that literally shatters when you press a fork against it. Do you know another vegetable that does that? Tell me in the comments, because I am genuinely curious whether anyone has found something comparable. Now let us talk about what you need to buy, because this is the part of the recipe that I find most remarkable and that I think most people genuinely do not expect. 1 head of fresh cabbage, roughly 1 kilogram, which is just over 2 pounds. At the grocery store where I shop, that costs somewhere between $1 and $2 depending on the season. 3 large eggs, 1 medium onion and 3 cloves of garlic, salt and freshly cracked black pepper, a good olive oil for cooking, and if you have fresh herbs available, a small handful of flat leaf parsley or chive to finish. If you add everything up honestly, including the oil, you are looking at a meal that feeds 4 generous portions for somewhere between $2 and $3 total. I want you to actually sit with that number for a moment. $2 to $3. For a dish that, when I have served it to guests without telling them what it was, has received comments like, "This is incredible, what is that, can I have more, is this a new restaurant technique?" The answer every time is cabbage and eggs. The look on people's faces at that moment is something I genuinely look forward to. Have you ever served something simple to someone who expected something complicated and watched them recalibrate entirely? That experience is what cooking can be at its best, and this recipe delivers it reliably. Tell me in the comments, what is the most money you spent on a single dinner this week? I want to compare it to what this costs. To begin, shred your cabbage. Remove the outer leaves and cut the head in half through the core, then cut out and discard the tough central core from each half. You are now going to slice the cabbage into strips that are thin but not paper thin. Aim for something around 4 to 5 millimeters in width, which is thicker than a coleslaw cut but thinner than a rough chop. The width matters more than you might think, because it directly determines how the cabbage behaves under heat. If the strips are too thin, they will cook down into almost nothing, losing the substance and textural contrast that makes this fritter satisfying. If they are too thick, they will not integrate properly with the egg mixture, and you will end up with pockets of undercooked cabbage that's tough and raw at the center. 4 to 5 millimeters is the sweet spot, confirmed after more test runs of this recipe than I want to admit. Some at this stage will salt the shredded cabbage and let it sit for 10 minutes to draw out excess moisture before adding it to the egg mixture. I have done this ways extensively, and my honest opinion is that it depends on the specific cabbage. If the head feels very dense and watery when you cut into it, take the extra step of salting and draining. If it feels light and relatively dry, go straight to the bowl. This is the kind of judgment call you develop naturally with practice, and it is part of what makes cooking interesting rather than mechanical. What do you notice when you shred fresh cabbage? Dry or wet? That detail matters, and I find that it varies enormously by region and season. Into a large mixing bowl, crack your 3 eggs and add a generous pinch of salt and your cracked black pepper. Whisk this properly and vigorously for about 30 seconds until the mixture is uniform and very slightly pale. Do not just stir it. Whisk it, because you want the proteins to be evenly distributed through the liquid, not in clumps that will cook unevenly. Add your finely diced onion and minced garlic directly into the egg mixture. They go in raw. This is intentional and important. Do not pre-cook them. The reason is that when the aromatics cook inside the fritter rather than separately in a pan, the heat drives their sugars and volatile compounds inward rather than releasing them into the air above the stove. The onion sweetens and softens inside the fritter instead of in a skillet, and that difference in where the flavor develops is significant. You can taste it clearly in the result. This technique appears consistently across fritter recipes from Germany, Poland, Ukraine, and Hungary, all of which developed independently but arrived at the same conclusion: raw aromatics into the batter, not pre-cooked. Now add your shredded cabbage and mix everything together until every strand is coated in the egg mixture. Use your hands if you need to. This is not a moment for being precious or delicate about it. The distribution needs to be even and thorough, and sometimes a spoon or just does not cut it. Are you comfortable cooking with your hands, or does that feel uncomfortable to you? I ask because I think it is one of those dividing lines between cooks who connect with their ingredients and cooks who do not. Heat your pan over medium heat. Cast iron is my strong preference for this recipe because it does heat evenly across the surface and holds that heat consistently throughout the cook, giving you an even crust rather than hot spots and pale patches. If you do not have cast iron, a heavy-bottomed non-stick pan will work well. Add enough olive oil to coat the bottom of the pan generously, not a thick film, a proper visible layer that will conduct heat upward through the cabbage from below. When the oil is ready, drop a single strand of shredded cabbage into it. It should sizzle immediately and vigorously. If it sits quietly, wait another minute. If it smokes heavily, reduce your heat slightly and wait for it to settle. The sound when you pour the full mixture into the pan should be loud and immediate. It should hiss and crackle and fill your kitchen within seconds with the smell of caramelizing onion and toasting egg. Use the back of a spatula to spread the mixture evenly across the surface and press it gently into a thickness of about 2 to 3 centimeters. Do not press it thin in an attempt to make it cook faster. Thin fritters overcook on the outside while the center dries out. You want substance here, depth, something that can develop a crackling outer crust while remaining just barely tender and set on the inside. This is the moment where I need you to do something that will feel completely unnatural if you are an impatient cook. Put the lid on the pan, cover it completely, and then do not touch it for 5 full minutes. Do not lift the lid to check. Do not press the fritter with a spatula. Do not tilt the pan to see if the edges are browning. Walk away. The steam building that lid is cooking the cabbage from above, while the crust forms from below, and interrupting that process even once by lifting the lid, releases the steam and drops the internal temperature, and extends the cooking time and compromises the structure you are building. 5 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. Are you the kind of cook who can do that? Or are you constantly checking and adjusting and poking at things on the stove? I ask this specifically because the comments on this always split almost exactly in half, and I find that fascinating. Leave your answer below. At the 5-minute mark, remove the lid and look at the edge of the fritter. Tilt the pan gently and observe the underside at the rim. What you are looking for is a crust that is golden to deep amber in color, firm to the touch when you press the edge lightly with a spatula, and clearly set rather than still liquid or wobbly at the center. If it looks pale and soft, place the lid and give it another 2 minutes. If it looks golden and firm, you are ready for the flip. Take a plate or a flat pan lid that is wider than your and place it face down on top of the fritter, pressing it gently but firmly against the surface. Then, in one confident, committed, unhesitating mode, flip the pan and the plate together so the fritter drops face down onto the plate, revealing its golden crust. Immediately slide it back into the pan, raw side down. The key word there is confident. A slow, uncertain flip results in a broken fritter. A fast, decisive flip results in a perfect one. I know that sounds intimidating the first time, but consider this: even if it breaks apart, even if it falls into pieces in the pan, it will still taste extraordinary. The worst outcome of a failed flip is a scrambled cabbage that is absolutely delicious. So commit, be bold, flip it like you mean it. Add a small dose of fresh oil to the pan before the fritter goes back in, reduce the heat to medium-low, and give the second side 3 to 4 minutes uncovered. You are not building a crust here. You are finishing the cook-through and adding a light golden color for presentation. Remove the fritter from the heat and let it rest for exactly 2 minutes before cutting. I know 2 minutes feels like a very long time when your kitchen smells the way it currently smells. But those 2 minutes allow the internal proteins to firm and set, the steam to redistribute evenly through the cabbage, and the overall structure to consolidate into something that holds its shape when you cut it. Finish with your fresh herbs scattered over the top. Cut into wedges like a pie, or into squares for sharing. It is complete as a standalone meal. It works beautifully alongside a simple green salad dressed with lemon and olive oil. And I will be completely transparent with you. I have eaten this cold the following morning directly from a plate in the refrigerator, and it was arguably better than it was the night before. The flavors more concentrated and settled, the texture somehow even more defined. Have you ever made something that improved overnight? Because this is genuinely one of those recipes, and it changes the calculus of cooking it in terms of whether you want to make a double batch on purpose. I want to say something before we get to the result, because I think it is the most important thing in this entire video, and it has nothing to do with technique. We live in a time when food costs are rising in almost every country. Budgets are being stretched in ways that are genuinely stressful for a lot of families. When people are quietly making harder and harder choices about what goes on the table, and there is sometimes a pride issue attached to cooking cheaply, a feeling that if you are not spending significant money on dinner, you are somehow not providing well, not cooking at a serious level, not eating food that deserves to be called a real meal. I want to challenge that belief directly and without hesitation. The greatest food traditions in the world were built not by wealthy people with access to expensive ingredients, but by farmers and workers and immigrants who had very little and were absolutely determined to make it extraordinary anyway. The German grandmother who figured out that cabbage and eggs and patience and heat could produce something this good was not making it because cabbage was fashionable. She was making it because cabbage was what she had, and she was not willing to settle for something mediocre just because her resources were limited. That refusal, that insistence on excellence with whatever is available, is the most important cooking lesson I have ever encountered. Do you think there is still a stigma around budget cooking in your country or community? I would genuinely love to read your perspective on this in the comments below, because this is a conversation I think is worth having out loud and honestly. Make this recipe this week. Not a modified version, not a version with extra ingredients you think might improve it, not a version where you add cheese on top because you are not quite sure the cabbage can carry it. Just this recipe, exactly as I have shown you once, from start to finish. And then come back to the comments and tell me what happened. Tell me if your family believed you when you said it was just cabbage. Tell me if it lasted more than 20 minutes on the table. Tell me if you sat there quietly stunned that something this simple, this fast, produced something this good. If you loved it, save this video right now because you will want to come back to it and you will want to show it to someone. If you are watching this and you are skeptical, if you genuinely think cabbage cannot compete with meat and you think I am overstating this, I respect that completely and I invite you to make it and then come back and tell me I was wrong. I love being proven wrong by honest cooking. Share this with someone who thinks vegetables are boring. And if you are not yet subscribed, this is an excellent moment, because this is exactly the kind of cooking we do here. Real ingredients, honest technique, maximum flavor, and no apology for keeping things simple